Hi everyone. Welcome to the Fast Track for Azure Modern Service Operation Learn Live session. I hope you're all doing well. I'm Renelle Fussler, a program manager in the Fast Track for Azure team. I started my career in telecommunication and moved into hardware engineering for Compaq HP before I joined Microsoft 16 years ago. My role prior to the Fast Track for Azure team was a service management premier field engineer, hence the passion for modern service operations topics. I'm joined today by my colleagues Rupal Madolka and Jason Purcell. Over to you, Rupal.
Thanks, Renelle. Hello, everyone. Namaste, Kia ora, good day, mates. I'm Rupal Madolkar, Senior Program Manager for Engineering Fast Track for Azure program based out of Melbourne and a peer of Renelle. I'm an IT native and modern day nomad. Started off as a C developer in India in the Y2K era and have worked in various roles in IT across US and Europe before moving to a technology leader role in Australia. I love working with the customers on the digital transformation journeys. And quickly introducing Jason, our peer who's based out of Brisbane. He's also an FTA program manager that specializes in government and education customers. He's going to answer all our questions today in the chat, so keep him busy. Over to you, Renelle.
Yes, the last thing we want is for Jason to sit there and do nothing. So please feel free to keep him busy, like Rupal said. So when we there we go. So today we're doing our Learn Live session, and you can complete all the training. But if we look at our learning objectives, we know that change is really difficult and it impacts people and culture, and it can actually feel risky. So it requires new and disruptive thinking. It requires leaders to adapt, to take risks, and really to learn quickly. And it also requires a real culture shift from within organizations. So as we execute more and more complex projects within our Fast Track for Azure team and working with customers, we've realized that a big part of the challenge is the people and the process and not always the technology. So the lack of clear strategy, stakeholder requirements and buy-in, roles and responsibility, reskilling, expectation management, all of those really plays a big part in achieving a successful cloud implementation. So it's important for customers to really take a look at their operating model to establish that, to establish roles and skills and responsibilities to effectively manage that cloud environment. They can start with an MVP approach, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, and evolve it over time as the teams mature. It's really important for organizations to really discuss those operating models and the cloud functions. So if you want to understand the cloud functions that is required for the operation, then we're going to discuss those. It gives us a good understanding of those, and it may assist you in really deciding on a model that is required and that best suits your organization. And then, last but not least, the roles and responsibilities is a key factor in a well managed environment. We'll look at some of the key roles, the templates, and the content for building and skilling your teams. Um, we also have a GitHub site, and we've got the link on the screen. Feel free to follow along in that GitHub site. It contains all the links to everything that we're going to discuss. But before we kick into discussing operating models and everything, we want to make sure that we provide a brief introduction of the cloud adoption framework as well as the well-architected framework. So the cloud adoption framework brings together the cloud best practices from Microsoft employees, partners, and customers. And Rupal and myself, even we've been providing some updates to some of the documents. And we also speak to our partners quite regularly to understand how they use the tools and the templates. Because Cloud Adoption Framework contains those tools and templates to help us guide through each of the methodologies. And each of those methodologies is part of a broader cloud adoption lifecycle. And the Cloud Adoption Framework supports you throughout each phase of that adoption journey. So the methodologies that we have as part of the Cloud Adoption Framework is strategy, where you define your business justifications and your expected adoption outcomes. We also have the ready methodology, where we prepare your cloud environment for any planned changes. And innovate, it's where we develop new cloud native or hybrid solutions. And the manage provide guidance around managed operations for cloud and hybrid solutions. Organize, very important, where we align the teams and roles to support your organization's cloud effort. Then plan migrate provides the guidance around migration and modernization of your existing workloads. And then secure provide that improve security over time. Lots of great information in there. And govern is all about govern your environment in the workloads. But as we said, it is a really end-to-end life cycles, and we've got the phases. And as you see, the methodologies that we've just mentioned are really throughout the cloud adoption framework lifecycle, where we start with defining your strategy to where you migrate, modernize, or innovate in that adopt phase. But underpinning everything is our secure, manage, and govern phases, and that is where we really provide some guidance around risk mitigation, risk identification, how you manage things, and then how you govern that. But I'll hand over to Rupal to talk a bit about the well-architected framework, because between the two frameworks, there's a lot of guidance that can help us in our cloud transformation.
Thanks, Ranel. Coming to the Azure well-architected framework, I'll refer it to WAF going forward. It is a set of guiding tenets that can be used to improve the quality of your workload and the conditions under which your solution will remain effective. So these include things like capacity, speed, security, availability, and cost. WAF helps us identify and think through our non-functional requirements, and the framework is not alone. It's at the center of this ecosystem of best practices, documentation, assessments, reference architectures, and design principles. All this supported and amplified by partners and services offers to guide and assist you in improving your workload's quality. It contains workload specific guidance for special areas like mission critical, hybrid, IoT, and primarily focuses on maximizing uptime and Azure services related guidance too. We also now have sustainability guidance in the WAF to help think about energy consumption and sustainability goals for your organization. So I'm really excited as this was introduced because sustainability has been on my charts for a very long time, and this actually helps us quantify it.
Yeah, that's very interesting because we all have a requirement, or rather a duty, to look at sustainability. So it's great to see it in WAF.
Yeah, and I love the fact that we can also measure it for organizations. So that's really, really empowering, right? So coming back to the 5 pillars of WAF, it's basically based on 5 key themes or pillars of architectural excellence. It's helpful to think of these as lenses through which you can consider your solution, right? The first one is the reliability pillar. It's about how our system remains available and recovers from failures. Think RPO, RTO, SLA, SLO. So recovery point objective, recovery time objective, service level agreements, service level objectives. Those are the things which you'll be guided through on in this pillar. The second one is the performance pillar. It helps us ensure our system is responsive, and especially when we experience load. The third one is the security, which is very, very important, keeping in mind the recent cyber threats and breaches which we've had. It helps you consider how we mitigate threats and risk against our system. It also touches upon legal compliance areas too. The cost optimization pillar is about how to understand and reduce our solutions budget. Everything is better when it's cheaper. So this is the pillar, isn't it, Ronel? We always want a
Absolutely.
deal. Yeah.
Yes, and not only is there a lot of good guidance in the well-architected framework, but the cloud adoption framework also, we're very conscious about the costs that customers incur, and we want to make sure that they do it in the best possible way.
Yes, truly best for less.
Yes.
And the last one is very important, especially in context of this session, because operational excellence pillar, it relates to how we deploy, monitor, and manage our system in production. Right? Here we touch upon solution complexity, DevOps, and automation to make your life easier and operations easier. Also, it discusses design trade offs. As you can imagine, with all these different lenses and requirements, sometimes it'll be very hard to figure out how to balance them all. And sometimes you can't have everything you want, so you need to make trade offs. For example, suppose you're considering two different solution architectural options and proposals. You might think initially that one of them better supports your business requirements, but when you factor the technical considerations, you discover the other alternative has some advantages. You also need to consider the relative cost of implementing and also running two solutions and evaluate them across the five pillars. So you might end up selecting one of these alternatives after considering all the trade offs, weighing up the options, thinking through which ones matter the most for your business and for this particular use case. PAF also gives you a handy guide for incorporating the recommendations generated by Microsoft Azure Well Architected Review and Azure Advisor into a new established operational process for continuous workload improvement. WAF Review allows you to examine your workload through the lenses of the five pillars. Azure Advisor scans your Azure configuration and recommends changes to optimize deployments, increase security, and save you money. And it totally aligns with the five WAF pillars. That's the best part of it. So during your manage phase, which Ronelle mentioned, WAF helps you maintain the quality of the workload in line with your business changes. So the few steps which I follow as a practitioner is leverage the advisor score from your Azure portal to identify optimization opportunities across the five pillars, understand changes needed or incidents which have occurred, and look at product, feature, platform, and service updates, review the well architected framework after this, consider the architecture design trade offs to achieve your business goals, and finally define and implement recommendations. Or you can possibly put it in your backlog for prioritization and then take it at a later stage. But one thing is important, establish a regular cadence for workload optimization. And this is how WAF gets incorporated into the operation side of things, which this session is about. So now I'll hand it over to Ranel to take you through the actual crux of the session, which is the operating models. Over to you, Ranel.
Awesome. Thanks, Ripple. So what we're going to discuss today is the four major operating models that we discuss in the Cloud Adoption Framework. By no means are we saying that these are the only operating models, but these operating models are the ones that we've looked at and really identified where some of the advantages and disadvantages for the different operating models can be. So a cloud operating model is primarily driven by two factors: your strategic priorities and your motivations. So, as well as the scope of the portfolio that you're going to manage. So, if we want to look at operating models, what it is, an operating model just have a few number of factors. So, alignment to your business strategy, the organization of your people, the change management or the adoption processes, operations management, governance and compliance, and security. So if we look at our IT operating model factors, they are essential to the long-term technology operations. The current operating models, if you look at an on-prem operating model, that really focuses on your physical assets and their physical locations, which are generally funded through your capital expenditure cycles. So these assets support workloads that the business needs to maintain and operate. The mission of most operating models is really to prioritize those workloads by investing in the stability of those physical assets. So why are we discussing cloud operating models and how are they different? So operating in the cloud, it changes the way we do hardware refreshes, midnight patches, all the manual tasks that we used to do. As a hardware engineer, I used to be in a server room midnight to do patches, to do replacements of hardware. But now with the cloud, that shifts your focus upstream to operating systems, applications, and your digital data assets. So it shifts from your physical to digital, and it also, and that way you have to shift your operating model to adapt to that. As those operating models shift to the cloud, you still need the same people and processes. However, you shift that focus, like I said, to a higher level of operations. And so people don't necessarily have to focus on server uptime anymore. They now want to look at some of the success metrics, and also security is no longer really just protected by the four walls of your data center. So your threat model changes, and the pace at which you manage your changes might also change, because procurement may no longer be a block to innovation. So if we look at the cloud operating model, it's a collection of processes and procedures that really define how you want to operate in the cloud. And the purpose of that operating models is really to shift your focus from your digital assets and the workloads that they support. And it gives you an opportunity to really reimagine your operating model, and how the cloud adoption framework can help you to define your operating model. So for this reason, the well-architected framework is very important to consider, as it provides us with that architectural pillars for the workload design, like Rupal said. um, and the operating models that we are going to look at today is the decentral operating model. So decentralized operating model, that's one of our least complex operating models. The priority for that operating model is really innovation over control. One of the distinct advantages for the decentralized operating model is the speed of innovation. The workload team have full control over the design, the build, and and operating the workload, and that can sometimes sit within a specific team within IT. It can also sit in a specific team within the business. One of the distinct disadvantage of that is a reduction in cross workload standardization. So as the organization adopt the cloud more broadly, you might find that naming conventions, governance, and some consistent efforts are not really centralized, and there's no economies of scales there. And the risk really is that it is in some organization where you have third-party requirements, third-party compliance requirements. It's really hard to make sure that every workload, if you don't have control of it, that every workload adheres to that compliance requirements.
Yeah, I love this as a developer, right? In the beginning, I had my own server when I started. Didn't have to depend on anybody on getting my hardware. So it's a great model for innovating, right? I used to do my own thing. I think, and as I grew, I matured. I realized the importance of having a centralized or a more enterprise model. So I had a public sector customer which started their cloud journey for their sustainability project using custom vision with no centralized cloud team. They had full ownership of tenant and subscription, and we could really innovate fast, fail fast, and I've seen and now the central cloud team has been formed, and they're handing over the IS activities to that team as they continue to innovate, and the central IT team starts to support them. So, and I also have seen a lot of CTO teams and data science teams starting this as they experiment and innovate. So a very, very great model for innovation as a priority. And I've seen it personally in my own experience. So I know now better that, yeah, I could have done without the extra tasks. And I'm really grateful for the centralized teams which provide me that now as a developer.
Awesome.
And especially the
Thanks.
cloud.
Great insights. Thanks, Rupal. And then, if we look at central operations, which Rupal just touched on, that really prioritize central control over innovation. It's existing operational process over the culture shift to modern cloud operations. So if we look at that, the distinct distinct advantages of that is really economies of scale. You get the best in breed controls, you get standardized operation. It's really most advantageous to centralize team with a portfolio of just a few hundred workloads with modest architectural complexity and compliance requirements. But one of the disadvantages is really scaling to meet the demands of a large portfolio of workloads. So if you've only got a specific size team, the more workloads you have, the more under the pump that central IT team will be. And if you have that central operations. So just think of that. The risk there is also, because everything is so tightly controlled, it's very slow to do a culture shift within the cloud.
That's
What
so
do you think
true.
of that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I've seen a lot of customers struggle to move from on-prem processes to cloud processes and rather become detractors, right? So, but I've seen existing customers with huge on-prem infra teams which are adopting cloud for the first time naturally move to this model. It's how they operated in on-prem. As they start learning cloud ways of working and adapt, a lot of them might just outsource it to a cloud service provider for better management, right? So the cloud portion, they may end up with a hybrid team. The cloud portion is done by the cloud service provider, and the on-prem is done by the customer team. So I've seen multiple models in the centralized model, but I think it's the first step into evolving into a cloud adoption as they go into a cloud adoption journey. Also, I feel this model might be a deterrent in global organizations. So I have worked with some global customers which have teams all over the world, Europe, Asia, US, South Africa. Uh, for this, it might be a problem because things really slow down and the cultural shift is even more slower. What do you think, Ranel? Have you seen this happening with your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. No, you've hit the nail on the head there. And that's why we'll come to my favorite of the operating models. We always have a favorite, don't we? So the enterprise operations that really prioritize the democratization of technical decisions. The democratization of technical decisions shift that responsibility previously held by central IT to those workload teams where it's applicable, and keep it in the central IT where that is applicable. So if there's a team that needs to have innovation and need to have that deployment freedom, then that's carved off. However, they still have the underlying compliance and all the regulations, naming conventions, and everything managed by central IT, but their environment, it's free for them to deploy in there. So segmentation of environments and separation of duties really allow for the balance between control and innovation there. Central operations can maintain that central operations for workloads that require the increase of compliance and the stable state operations, or those ones that represent greater risk. So those can all be controlled by central IT. But one of the distinct advantages are really, the disadvantages. What work well on premise might not always work in an enterprise cloud in operations. So culture shifts in control and responsibilities are often the biggest challenge. Operational shift that follows that culture shift can take time, commitment, and effort to implement, and then also to mature and to stabilize. But in this way, there's really that economies of scale that you can have, and also the freedom of deployment and management where it's required. So the risk to this approach, it does require executive commitment, um, because the executive commitment will drive the change strategy. It also requires commitment from the technical teams to overcome some of the learning curves and deliver the required change in the organization. And long-term cooperation between the business, between your cloud center of excellence or your central IT and your workload teams is required to see long-term benefits. So everyone kind of needs to be on the same page for this.
Yeah, Totally agree. I've seen a lot of early cloud adopters move to this model as they mature from the central IT model, right? They shift from being a controlling organization to a enabling organization. So they start providing guardrails, policies, and enablers for the workload team to move it to best practice and give more autonomy and democratize the entire workload process. So the technical side of the workload is enabled by the enterprise team. So it's like a dream where you have enterprise operations, but you also have the autonomy of agile operations. So that's what I think the teams love, both the workload teams and also the central IT teams. So it's a good balance of rapid adoption with centralized governance for consistency and cross portfolio optimizations. I think it's best of both worlds, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also does create a very good working relationship between the business, the workload teams, and IT.
It
So
does.
the last one we're looking at is the distributed operations. The priorities there is a really integration of multiple existing operating models. We see it kind of as a transitional state with a focus on moving the entire organization to one of the previously mentioned operating models. So longer term operational approach when the organization is too large or too complex to align to a single operating model. We also see this in mergers and acquisitions, and if you work in government where you have to, when a new government comes into power, where there's departments that move in and out of different departments. So we often see that there. The advantages there is the integration of common operating models elements from each business unit. It really creates a vehicle to group operating units into a hierarchy and really help to mature those operations using a very consistent, repeatable process. The disadvantage, though, is consistency and standardization across those multiple operating models. It is difficult to maintain that for extended periods of time. As you can imagine, if there's lots of different operating models, to just bring them in or to maintain the consistency will be really hard. So the risk in the distributed operations is really a lack of commitment to bringing that into a primary operating model, and that can sometimes lead to confusion across the teams. And it should only really be used where there's no way to align to a single operating model. And as we know, there may be cases for that, but not something that we would promote as leave that for a long period of time. What do you think, Ripple?
I think so too. I think, but there needs to be some standardization. Like I can imagine global companies starting off with a distributed model. I think Ronald, you and me were working with a global customer which deployed the same solution or the same product
Yeah.
in different geographies differently. I remember that distinctly, and slowly I've seen them evolve into a more consistent approach across geographies, and that has benefited them a lot. So I feel um, if your business demands it at the beginning, where you're doing large scale migrations across large portfolios, or you have got into mergers or acquisitions, and or there are complexities, you can start with the distributed and eventually come to a more centralized model, which is a more enterprise level enabler for everybody. It's a tough job, but for those
Yes.
kind of things. But yeah, I think it's when you've had the journey and got to that, you definitely see the benefits. And I've seen this particular customer definitely reap those benefits of the hard change which they went through.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Rupal. And when we look at these operating models, the one thing that we need to think about is how are we going to make this happen? What are the cloud functions that is required for us to put in place to really maintain our environment? So we've done I would say the Cloud Adoption Framework team have done a good job of identifying the cloud functions. And functions are tasks and responsibilities that are really key to an organization. It's really the things that the jobs that needs to get done when you look at supporting an environment. So if we look at the different cloud functions that we've got this cloud strategy function, and that really the strategy function is a team that defines the motivations, business outcomes for your cloud adoptions, and they also validate and maintain the alignment between your business priorities and your adoption efforts to make sure that you are getting the right business outcomes. When we look at the cloud adoption function, the cloud adoption teams are really our modern day equivalent of technical of project teams, of our technical implementation teams or project teams. It enables the implementation of those will determine the success. So the team providing the necessary cloud adoption function can be staffed from multiple subject matter experts or implementation partners. And your cloud adoption function will actually change depending on the workload that you are either innovating in the cloud or migrating or modernizing in the cloud. So just have a look at the cloud adoption functions and base that on the different projects that you may have. So the cloud governance function team really ensures the risk and risk tolerance are properly evaluated and managed. And the team ensures the proper identification of risks that really can't be tolerated by the business. And the people within that team convert risks into governing corporate policies. When we look at the central IT team, when your cloud adoption expand from one team to multiple teams relatively quickly, additional support from your existing IT staff is needed. But often, if you haven't prepared the teams for that, those staff members may lack in training experience. They may not know the tools that is required for migrating or managing things in the cloud. So that often drives the formation of a central IT team governing the cloud. And while setting up a central IT team is common as a common sign of maturity, if it's not managed effectively, it can really become a high risk adoption, potentially blocking innovation and migration efforts. So it's really important to look at the teams that you put together when you do your cloud adoption. So cloud operations functions that delivers maximum workload performance and maximum business interruption within an agreed upon operations budget. So the operations team really focus on monitoring, repairing, and remediation of issues related to your traditional IT operations and assets. So in the cloud, many of those capital costs and operational activities are now transferred to the cloud provider. So having a look at no more OS patching, no more hard drive replacements. So the responsibility will then vary on the platform that you select. So if you are selecting a software as a service platform, there is less activities that operations function need to perform compared to if you select an infrastructure as a service function, where you're still responsible for the operating system and upwards. So just look at that when you look at the operations function and determine what you need in that space. Then the Cloud Center of Excellence function, I always call it, rightly or wrongly, I always call it our modern day service improvement team. So many organizations share the core objectives of really achieving business and technical agility. And the Cloud Center of Excellence is a function that helps organization balance the speed and stability while they pursue their objective. They really there to help mature the practices, the quality indicators, improve the reliability, performance, efficiency, security, maintainability, and customer satisfaction. So they are responsible for looking at the indicators and make sure that there's improvement programs across that. The cloud platform function, the they introduce the cloud introduced many technical changes, as well as opportunities to streamline some of your technical solutions. But generally, IT principle and business needs stay the same. You still need to protect your sensitive business data. And if your IT platform depends on a local area network, there's still a good chance that you'll need network definition in the cloud. So users who need to have access to applications and data will want their current identities to access their relevant cloud resources as well. So while the cloud represents those opportunities to learn new skills, your current architects should actually be able to directly apply their experience and subject matter expertise. So cloud platform functions are usually provided by a select group of architects who focus on learning about the cloud platform, and they will aid others and in the decision making and also proper application and controls for that cloud environment.
Totally. I think cloud platform function is very, very important and needs to be thought separately from a central IT function. I think moving to my favorite, cloud automation, uh, because during cloud adoption efforts, cloud automation functions unlock the potential of the DevOps and a cloud native approach. Expertise in each of these areas can accelerate adoption and innovation. So the skills which are needed to provide cloud automation functions can be provided by DevOps engineers, developers with DevOps and infra expertise, or IT or infra engineers with DevOps and automation expertise. So these are subject matter experts, and they might be providing these functions in other areas of such as cloud adoption, cloud governance, cloud platforms. They would be the ones who would be helping the other teams in terms of DevOps and automation. And after they demonstrate proficiency at automating complex workloads, you can recruit these experts to deliver automation to other teams. And this is a very important function, especially for agile teams, right? Um, the next one is the cloud data functions. Analytics is omnipresent. There are multiple audiences which is involved in analytics conversations, including the typical seller, database architect, and infrastructure team. So in addition, analytics solution also involve influencers, commanders, and decision makers from enterprise architecture, data science, business analysts, executive leadership positions. These teams are actually responsible for putting together complex solutions with components spanning across wide range of data tools and solution. And
Yeah,
the yeah,
sorry, Rupal, to
yeah,
interrupt, but yeah, we see, with cloud that the analytics in the data space, it just provides such good analytic capability for organizations.
it does. It does. And it's just important that we realize that, data is an integral part of the whole cloud journey. It's not just the infra part of it or the app part of it. So it's great that this has been called out now in our frameworks.
Yeah.
Um, and and the last but not the least is security. Security is a team sport, right? There are infosec teams which need to be there in each part of your journey, right? So individuals in the security team need to work together and see other parts, other as to see each other as integral parts of the whole organization. They are also part of a larger security community defending against the external threats. So some of the organizational functions within the security would be, maintaining the policy and standard, the security operation, security architecture, maybe people security, application security, data security, identity and key management, posture management, incident preparation. So a lot of security does a lot of foundational work to keep your application safe and your environment safe. So it needs to be a part of each and every conversation and is a central team across all the other teams. So that's where earlier they come in, the better.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said security is a team sport. There's so many aspects to it, and the integration of security into absolutely everything we do. So yeah, no, that's awesome. Cool. And that kind of concludes our cloud function. So now that we understand, we've got the operating model, what are those functions that we need for a well-managed cloud? Let's have a bit of a look around the organizational alignment, because that is where we kind of bring it all together. We really need to think about what that organizational alignment means. And the most important aspect of any cloud adoption plan is the alignment of people, because people will make that plan a reality. No plan is complete until you understand the people related aspect. And that's something that Rupal and myself have talked about a lot, because we work with customers. We've got a very we've got a very capable engineering team. They always talk about the technical aspects of things, but the people aspect is really important. So, and true organizational alignment will take time. It will become important to establish those long-term organizational alignments, especially as your cloud adoption scale across your business and IT culture. Because as people say, as people see, it's easy to deploy. We can get a market advantage. We can have some cost advantages. The adoption of the cloud may actually accelerate. So at each phase of the IT industry, the most notable changes have often been marked by changes in staff roles. One example in the transition is the transition from mainframe computing to client server computing. So the role of the computer operator during this transition have really largely disappeared. So that's been replaced by your administrator roles. And when virtualization arrived, the requirement for individuals working with physical servers was replaced with a need for virtualization specialists. So hence we can see why in our IT teams, members may feel anxious about the roles and the positions, because they realize that they need a different set of skills to support their cloud solution. But agile employees who explore and learn new cloud technologies, they shouldn't fear. They can lead the adoption, because as we know, basic organizational change management is, if you have advocates within those teams, people that can lead the charge within those teams, that can really help you to bring the teams along, and they can embrace the changes associated with this. So it's very important to have a consultative approach. So capture concerns, understand from the teams what their concerns are, and involve them in the process. And also understand the area of concern, whether it's a lack of skills, resistance of change. So really understand where those concerns come from, and also identify gaps, because understand that the skills in the teams today, and understand what you will require for your new environment. Because when we look at the teams that we have today, we have an enormous amount of experience and skills within our teams. So what do they need to do to put the screwdrivers down and really look at how to manage and operate at a higher level for operational excellence. And then we may also then see that identify those skills that will no longer be required, and the new skills that will be required, and then create skills plans for those. Partner across the teams, with some of the skill relationships and dependencies that can span multiple roles. Those roles may exist in several different departments. For example, a workload owner might require someone in an IT role to provision a core resource like a subscription or a resource group. And those dependencies really represent the new process in the organization. So, and like Rupal talked about, the automation function. So our DevOps engineers can actually help with automation of and deployment of a lot of the things that we have in our environment. So partner across the teams, and that will help to implement a really good structure. So if we look at the different structures that we need, during every cloud adoption effort, certain functions must be provided by at least one person. So the assignment and team structures can develop organically, or it can be very intentionally designed to match and define your team structure. But then we also need to have a look at the workloads that we are going to implement. So, if it's a workload from an innovation perspective that we're going to deploy, and we just trying this cloud thing, and we want to make sure that we do it right. What we want to do is looking at a cloud adoption team, so the technical implementation team, but we also want to look at a governance team, because we want to make sure that there's governance wrapped around that implementation. So really, what is needed for your adoption effort? So as you then move with larger scale adoptions, your structure type may change. And Rupal's going to take us through the roles and responsibilities a little bit later. So our cloud functions, as we mentioned the cloud functions earlier, the functions are tasks and responsibilities that are key to an organization, really those jobs that need to be done. So understanding those functions will go a long way in identifying the gaps and planning for the future. And then when we look at the mature team structures, first, we mentioned the structure type related to your specific adoption activity, but as your adoption need grows, so does the need to create balance and structure. So to meet those needs, organizations often have to follow a process of maturing through their organizational structures. And then we have the RACI matrix. That's where we map roles and teams into the functions of the cloud operating model, and that the matrix included the responsibility, accountability, consulted, and informed roles. And we will go into the RACI. I will share a larger version of that, and Rupal will take us through that.
Yeah, sure. I think we have created a RACI template to help you map people to roles and align responsibilities across teams for the required capabilities. Information in the cloud adoption framework is dispersed across multiple pages. What we have attempted to do here is distill that particular thing in a RACI template. So it helps us clarify who is responsible for providing the results and the outcomes. So who does the work, who's accountable for the results or outcomes, the final approver or leader. There should be only one person accountable for each capability. Who needs to be consulted prior to the work being implemented, which are likely to be subject matter experts, and who needs to be kept informed or kept up to date on the progress about the changes. So the first sheet which we have is the org alignment sheet, and it helps clearly document the accountabilities for a particular org function and map the leaders accountable for that function and removes the ambiguities for the team. It's a central point of reference for everybody for that particular function, for the functions. There are also often multiple cloud adoption teams in most operating models. It expands on the cloud adoption teams' accountabilities with regards to the workloads which they are responsible for, the data centers, for example, they might be responsible for, or portfolios, depending on your org structure. It also documents the subject matter experts within each functions for more specialized areas like network security, finance, DevOps, as I mentioned earlier, right? So overall, there are many resources available to an organization to ensure that their teams have skills and capabilities. We have attempted to create a starting point reference with team and key accountabilities, skills and roles for various cloud functions across services and capabilities, alongside the training and certs sample deliverables and Azure tools templates and assessments for each. So here we we start with some guidance for the best practice MVP, where we recommend that you have at least, as Ronel mentioned, 2 teams to create a balance between adoption and governance for control. But in this particular one, each team is wearing many hats, as you can see in the RACI. This is not sustainable as the adoption grows. And you would need fully staffed, proven organization structure along with approaches to aligning the appropriate structure to your organization maturity. For example, as you move to a central IT team or have a strategic alignment or operational alignment, or the North Star, which is the Cloud Center of Excellence. So we have also provided the guidance for the best practice fully staffed model on the lines of the Cloud Center of Excellence in the next tab. And this is kind of a modern cloud first operating model, which is documented here. So this approach provides centralized IT functions like governance, security, platform, and automation with a strong focus on self-service and democratization. This model is unlikely to occur organically and often requires executive support. So this particular sheet will be a good reference point to the sponsors. And last but not the least, the crux of all the thing, which is all the documentation, is the fully staffed best practice model. So you have the key accountabilities on the one side, skills and roles for various cloud functions, and also we have put in sample deliverables, training and certs, which would be required to upskill your team, the Azure tools and templates which you might have for each, or assessments which you would like to do for that particular area or function. So it's like a digest of the organizational alignment to help you and your sponsors to come up to speed and align your organizational structure and roles and responsibilities. So it's our humble attempt to do that. Any feedback on this is appreciated. Happy to take it from your lived experiences. So that's the asset which we have for you to take away. I
Are
think
they?
Jason will share
Yeah.
the link, isn't it, Ronelle?
The link is actually on the there was a banner that was shared
Mm,
there was shared within the presentation,
okay,
and
cool.
um, we really encourage you to ask some questions if you want to. Please feel free to keep Jason really busy. So if we look at this, what we've done with the team and accountability, it's actually quite easy to then to go, your cloud strategy team. What is that team's key accountability? And they are responsible for really leading that adoption within the organization, and really ensuring that those business outcomes, the people, everything is aligned to to the business required business outcomes. And in that strategy team, we often say, with the when we put together a cloud strategy, we want to ensure that we listen to the business as well. So where we have a organization where we have the executive sponsor, we then go, how can the finance team benefit from our cloud transformation? How can the HR team benefit from it? So getting representation from those teams within our strategy team will really help the business adopt the change as well. And we've also seen where the business is involved, organizations move a lot faster, and they really the business and IT relationship really improves. So the other thing that we've done in this was also, you know, um, looking at those the training and certifications that we've got available, and just for business alignment, that strategy team, some of the things we've suggested, and this is by no means the only certifications, but at least for that strategy team, have a base knowledge of Azure, of the cloud. So there are some fundamental cloud training that they can do. From an enterprise architecture perspective, TOGAF skills are always great to have in that strategy team. Your PMBOK, PMP, that's your project management certifications, and ProSci from an organizational change management perspective. We often see some of the projects that we work with where the organizational change management is something that is one of the last things that is being considered. So, from someone that's been working with these projects and seeing where some of the organizations struggle to actually take on the operations of the cloud environment, or some of just some of the change process from a service desk perspective, where organizational change management is that banner where that can live under. So always good to have people understanding the requirements for organizational change management. And we've done that through all of those the different areas, from a solution delivery, where you come into the architecture certifications and all those things. And then, if we look at these best practices from a staffing perspective, there's so many different things that you can do as an organization to help your teams skill up. We've got Microsoft Learn, which is a free resource, which is amazing. There's, going into Microsoft Learn, choosing the area of interest and choosing your role that can really target, and also your proficiency level, that can really target your learning through Microsoft Learn. And then we also have, for those organizations where we know people are really focused on certifications, they can go in and they can actually do their certification. So there's the official Microsoft curriculum that can then help with those certifications. Anything you'd like to add there, Rupal?
No, I think it's skilling is a very important thing, and what skills are required for each strategy, each teams is very important. So skilling plan, as you mentioned earlier, is a very key part of the adoption. So it's very important. So the way we take it from the business alignment to solution delivery to change management to the operations governance, platform maturity, platform operations, and platform automation, and how these functions will work in those areas and which functions are accountable for those is made very clear here. So it makes it very clear that whoever is representing that particular team is aware that he or she is accountable for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the last thing you want is something not being done because no
Yeah.
accountability or responsibility has been assigned.
Yep.
Excellent. So now we move on to process alignment. And process are really at the core of how we manage and maintain our environments. We need to consider how the introduction of cloud solutions, features, tools, and processes will integrate and change how we operate today. So we're going to touch on a few process considerations, but it will be important for organizations to review their processes and really identify how it needs to adapt, to follow on from for them and help them to be successful in the cloud. And again, some of your operating models that can also help with informing what processes need to be used and what processes need to be changed. So the first one I'd like to talk about is Azure Service Health. It's just such a large and insightful tool, if I can call it a tool. Um, and it looks, if we look at incident and problem management processes, today you might have a process where your support teams look at monitoring dashboards to determine, if an issue is there, and how to communicate with your users and report those issues. With the introduction of cloud, we need to educate our support teams on the tools that are available to determine whether the issue is an issue that is being seen within your organization, or if that issue is at the cloud vendor side. Else we may actually spend a lot of support resources on troubleshooting an issue that may actually be part of a wider issue for that our cloud vendor are experiencing. So the Azure Service Health is really a combination of Azure Status. It informs you of service outages, of service health, a, um, really a personalized view of the health of the Azure service in the regions that you are using it in, and then also resource health, where it provides you information of the health of your individual cloud resources, such as your specific virtual machines, for instance. Um, if there's an Azure-wide issue, depending on the complexity and the widespread nature of the issue, you'll find that a root cause analysis document will be posted 5 to 7 days after the incident associated with that incident. So again, look at your incident and problem management processes to see how these will be impacted and how your processes need to be adapted to also include these things that is provided by your cloud provider. We then look at our support plans. Review the services that you are using, understanding your commitment to the business related to those services, and ensuring that you've got appropriate support in place for your environment. So whether you've got ProDirect support, whether you've got unified support or partner support, just ensure that those support teams know what is available to them, how to use it, and also ensure that when we look at our service catalog, those SLAs, the service level agreements or service level objectives that we have with the organization, that our support is appropriate to provide that level of support. So cost management. Cost management is a really interesting topic when we come and discuss cloud cost management, because now procurement of hardware is no longer a barrier to use to deploy IT services. We really need to ensure that we build a cost-conscious organization, especially if cost reduction is one of those motivations that we had for moving to the cloud. Activity, trust me. Like other cloud adoption topics, it is really iterative. We've got 3 independent activities. The first one is visibility, really establishing the right reporting scopes, ensure that resources are appropriately organized, whether you've got management group, resource group, subscriptions, and then your tagging strategies, the way you name your resources, and also and the way you name it, and then who owns those resources, because that's all configurable, and then you can actually report on the cost appropriately. So when we look at the accountabilities there from a accountabilities perspective, that starts with those clear budgets for adoption efforts. So budgets should be established, it should be clearly communicated, and also be based on realistic expectations. When we look at those budgets, when we create those, especially if we look at project budgets and cost management, if a project says, we need X amount of dollars for a solution that we're going to deploy, we want to see something like maybe, the Azure pricing calculator being used in that in the project team to provide us with an estimation of what that solution is going to cost us. So then what we can do is we can go through and set up the appropriate alerts against those budgets and things that we expect from that. But it's also then, once we've got the visibility, we've got the accountabilities, we go into a optimization stage. Optimization is really there for cost reduction. And with cost reduction, there's a few different tools that we can use for that. So with Azure Advisor, it was very well explained as part of the well-architected framework, but that provides us it provides us visibility of the cost saving suggestions, like if there's over provisioning of resources, unused IPs. We've seen that a few times. Where there's reserve instance suggestions, where customers can really save a ton of money through just using the tools, but having that cost management as an iterative approach, and also as part of your operations, having a look at that.
Yeah, I think I remember for first-time cloud adopters, especially with decentralized model, cost can really stack up if you are experimenting but not keeping an eye or it's not governed, and brings an unpleasant surprise when you get the bills. So I think it is very important. The cost management part is put into the governing practice quite early in the game, and the culture of the cloud being always available is very empowering, but at the same time, it could be very costly.
That's right, yes. And then another thing, is the SLAs, our service level agreements or our service level objectives, and Azure resilience. Where we have our service level agreements in place in our service catalog, again, that's some of the processes that we need to look at. Will the architecture that we have planned for the service in Azure enable us to deliver to the agreement that we have with our business? Do we need to renegotiate our SLAs, or can we review the architecture for cost savings? Because if we have a architecture that is really going to provide, 5 nines, and the organization doesn't need that. Like Rupal said earlier, there's some trade-offs in, around cost, around any of the pillars. There are some trade-offs. So if the more resilient you make a solution, the more it's going to cost you. So balance the resilience with the SLAs, and then you can review that. So, because reliability is also a shared responsibility, and we need to understand what is required. So, Microsoft will be responsible, for the reliability of the cloud platform, but our customers and partners are responsible for the reliability of the cloud applications, and using your architectural best practices based on those requirements of the workload and the guidance from the well-architected framework when you create that, is very important.
Yeah,
Over
totally
to
agree.
Rupal.
Yeah, back to me. I think in modern service operations, processes need to be modified, as Ronald just mentioned, and especially to leverage the ever-evolving cloud platform, which gets me to the change management side of things. How do you keep on top of it? How do you stay current in an ever-changing world? Ronald mentioned the service health alerts, which provide timely notifications about ongoing service issues, planned maintenance, and health advisories. These alerts also include information about Azure features scheduled for retirement. Azure updates for announcement about product updates is very readily available, and you can also have an RSS feed for the updates. There is Azure blog, which communicates the most important announcement for the Azure platform. Following this blog can help you keep up to date with the critical information, and you can subscribe to it through our RSS feed too. And there are service-specific blogs which can be leveraged. So there's a few things which you can leverage. Also, there's Azure Info Hub, which you can again subscribe through Info Hub RSS feed. These are a few things which will help you stay on top of the changing platform and help you evaluate whether the new feature which has been added to the service can be incorporated for versus a long workaround which you have done to incorporate that feature in your solution. So it's very important, as I mentioned earlier in the WAF too, that you have this regular cadence of workload optimizations where you intentionally look at these changes in the cloud platform and see if we can optimize your solution in any way in terms of reliability, security, all the 5 pillars, or in terms of any particular new features which have come in, which can help your product get a little more agile or a little less complex, I would say. So I'll give you an example, like the platform updates. You can what we do publish is it's the if there's any maintenance being done on the VMs, right? There might be no reboot maintenance, almost non-zero impact, live migrations, where you require reboot, and you might have to use techniques in your process to make sure that you adapt to the live migration. Yeah, something which requires reboot, and how you would how would you handle that maintenance window for your organization, for your business, for your solution. So also platform as a service, when you use it, it means that the OS and the application stack are managed for you. You only manage your application and data, right? So with that in mind, it's always useful, and especially for the infra IT teams, they would like to know that, as a PaaS user, they like to know the information about the PaaS services, like how and when are the OS updates applied, how is the service patched against significant vulnerabilities. I can't say that word. And which OS and runtime versions are running your apps, right? Runtime updates are very important to developers. And there's a Kudu console which enables you to query your service instance regarding OS version and runtime version. So it's good to know what is available to you through the platform for past services, especially. So these are the few things you need to be aware so that you can tweak your change management processes to incorporate the platform changes. And how you're going to tackle them. Are you going to look at it, postpone the updates, wait, and then have a regular change in runtime? Do you need to upgrade? Is it transparent? So a few things which you need to look at before on how to handle these changes. There is also a high level approach to agile change management in the migration effort. It overall aligns to Scrum framework, like a migration backlog, which is an epic. It's consists of portfolio of workload that could be migrated and prioritized by business value, each at varying stages of discovery. So it allows you to track through your top level portfolio that can be migrated. The release backlog is generally user stories, which you pick up. It's a single workload or a small list of workloads promoted when all assets are migrated. A migration release deploys one or more workloads into production, and it also has several iterations in it, right? So every 2 to 4 iterations is generally what is recommended. So every 1 or 2 months you would have a release, depending on your business. Iteration backlog is a list of tasks or assets to migrate and work. And the work that has been done has to be done to migrate that. So it's basically 2 to 4 week time period that an iteration backlog happens. So overall, how do you incorporate all the backlog processing and make it an agile process with the cloud is very important to be documented in your change management procedures, right? And the enabler, which is
And
platform automation. Yeah, Renel, did you have
yeah, and
something to add there?
yes, yes.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
wanted to say, we've seen organizations really embracing the agile approach, with moving to the cloud, where some of the organizations where we've seen that's used a bit of a waterfall approach, that haven't been greatly successful. I'm not saying that it's never successful, but the ones that we've seen, the customers that we've seen being successful really quickly are the ones that's embraced the agile approach.
yeah, totally. I think cloud is by nature agile. It's how you consume it
Yeah.
through your processes, which makes a huge difference to your digital transformation journey. So overall, the goal for platform automation and DevOps is to align your desired DevOps and principles to Azure landing zone lifecycle management, right? How you provision, manage, evolve your operations through extreme automation and infrastructure as code. The in a software defined cloud infrastructure world, teams use various tools and techniques to provision, configure, and manage infrastructure. And as your teams evolve, they can transition from using the portals where you do manual deployments to using code and automation to provision and manage infrastructure services. So the idea is to follow an everything as a code approach. So not only the application and the data part of it, but everything as a code, including the platform services. So for full transparency and configuration control, uh, easier deployments, documentation and testing processes, it's good to use version control to manage all your code repositories. So infrastructure as a code, policy as a code, configuration as a code, deployment as a code, documentation code. You can codify everything to automate it, and that's being the north star of it. But you can eventually go into that maturity, so that your deployments are just a click of a button, I would say.
Yeah, and we've
So
seen that creates a repeatability. It creates a really consistent process in deployment, but it also creates a really almost a fail-safe approach where you can test your code first, and then once you're ready to deploy, that is good code. So yeah, no, I do like the automation approach.
yeah, awesome. I think that that comes, I think that seems to be the last topic, isn't it? Do we want
Yeah,
to go quickly to the summary slide,
yeah,
Ronelle?
yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, what we've set out to do today was to actually help with the understanding of the different operating models and functions. So, the next steps really is to go choose your operating model that really aligns with your business priorities and motivations. Use the templates, use the tools that we've got available in the cloud adoption framework to actually help. And then, understand your teams and roles required for your cloud adoption journey. And we had a good question in the chat around the RACI. Rupal, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. I think the question, I'm just going to restate it. Is the RACI template able to be used for organizations looking to restructure to align with their cloud requirements? And is that a good place to start? I feel that was the intent. The content, we wanted to digest the content and present it in a digestible format. So this could be a very good conversation starter across the various functions and the different tasks which each you have to do as a part of adoption to your cloud. So it gives you a good one page layout of how your team would look like and what each one would be accountable, responsible for, who needs to be informed, who needs to be consulted, and that way you get off to a good start, I would say. Each of these things will be different for different organizations. Some teams might overlap in their responsibilities, but this is a very good place to start, I would say. What do you think, Ronelle?
Absolutely. And I think I always say to customers, please let common sense prevail, because
Yes.
when we look at templates and tools and documentation from any vendor, you know, it's a guideline, it's a starting point, and then don't try to stay within the confines of that. I would say use the opportunity to if you want to restructure, use the opportunity to create the teams and the structure that will provide you the best business benefit, and then use the templates as your guiding principles. Understand the functions that needs to be performed, understand the different accountabilities that needs to be in place, and then use that as your starting point. I hope we've answered your question in that. So yeah, build your teams using your cloud adoption framework RACI as your guiding principles. And then for process configuration, considerations. Again, identify those processes that you've got in your environment. Look at which processes needs to be changed to adapt to your cloud operating model, but also look at those processes where you can maybe automate some of that by policy. So really identifying process changes, making sure that the team supporting that environment also know what those support processes are, where they need to look for vendor status updates, and also where they need to look for root cause analysis, and adopt an agile deployment approach and DevOps. Anything else you would like to say on that, Rupal?
No, I think this covers most of the things which we set out to do. So I'm hoping the audience has got the benefit of listening to this session, and it's a good use of their time. So um, I have nothing more to add, and looking forward to the to getting any further questions, if any, on the YouTube channel. I'll be following it after this.
Yeah, and thank you so much for your time and patience. And connect with us on LinkedIn if you have any further questions, or like Rupal say on the channel. Please complete your interactive learning exercises. There are as part of the collection. The GitHub link is part of the collection, but there's also a few suggestions on some of the Microsoft Learn content that you can follow, especially around the cloud fundamentals. That is quite important to have those skills when you look at a cloud transformation journey. And then just a quick plug for our session next week. We've got a CI/CD automation for building, testing, and deploying applications on the 25th. Please feel free to join that session, and thanks again for your time.
Thank you.